Hello, good morning, Wei Liang.
Hello.
Okay, so before we start, let me introduce our next speaker, Wei Liang, which is a program director from Golden Equator and also the acting CEO from Social Impact Catalyst. So, a bit, a brief bio about Wei Liang. Having spent 10 years in the entrepreneurial scene, Wei Liang offers a wealth of experience in assisting and mentoring entrepreneurs as early as pre-ideation to market access stages. He is a strong believer in experiential learning and believes that entrepreneurship cannot be taught but experienced and that one can learn more from another's failure than success. Wei Liang has since helped startups raise more than 5 million USD. With Golden Equator currently, Wei Liang leads the entrepreneurship programs, working with regional governments and organizations to run programs and support entrepreneurs. Wei Liang is also a mentor and advisor for numerous universities, incubators, and startups across the region. On the side, Wei Liang serves as the acting CEO of Social Impact Catalyst, Singapore's first youth-centric organization focused on social entrepreneurship and innovation. He leads the ecosystem initiative, partnerships, and collaborations for the organization. He also mentors and advises social entrepreneurs. I welcome you, Mr. Wei Liang Lim, who will be touching on the role of startups in promoting and creating diversity and inclusion. Wei Liang, you may take the floor.
Thanks, Ian. Let me just quickly share my screen here. Right, and hi everyone. Thank you for having me. Right, so as Ian introduced, right, I will be talking about the role of startups in promoting and creating diversity and inclusion. Right, and just a very a simpler introduction of myself. Right, I'm the program director at Golden Equator and of Social Impact Catalyst. So, Social Impact Catalyst basically looks a lot in social entrepreneurs, right, across universities in Singapore. And myself, I am from Singapore. I'm a Singaporean. I was just in Brunei yesterday, and I'm in Vietnam now. I'll be going back to Brunei next week, right? So traveling a bit to look at the entrepreneurship and social enterprises space around the region as well. Uh, and something that I always like to tell people about, right? I can totally empathize and relate with entrepreneurs because I used to be an entrepreneur myself, right? I've started 5 different businesses, all of them failed in different ways, right? And hence, learning from each and every one of them. Coming back into the education sector itself, now I come into helping and supporting startups, right? So Golden Equator itself, right? If I have my next slide over here, just a very quick explanatory about what Golden Equator does, right? We have 2 parts of our business in the capital and community side, and I am helping to look at the entrepreneurship part of the program under Pinnacle, right? And we are in the midst of rebranding, so we will be called Golden Equator Learning in hopefully 1 to 2 months time, right? And with that itself, right, coming straight into the topic of diversity and inclusion, right? Before we even talk about the roles of diversity and of startups for diversity and inclusion, we need to understand what is exactly diversity and inclusion. So a very common area that most of the times when I'm talking about this, right? When I talk about diversity and inclusion, startups, people, right, stakeholders will always think of this thing called the UNSDG, right? The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not sure if all of us have heard of that, but this has been developed by the UN in 2015, right? And the goal, all these 17 goals are hoped to be reached by 2030 itself. And very honestly, right, this has been developed for a more sustainable, inclusive community around, but it's still very far from our targets, right? All of them are very far from our targets, right? And we only have 6 years left for this, right? According to the goal itself, right? So that is something that is worrying. And hence, right, you will see that more and more people starting to talk about, right, and be more concerned in the part of sustainability, right? One of the reasons having seen the impact, right, that it has created on the global side of things, the environmental side of things, as well as being more uh, um, concerned about the diversity and inclusion on the social aspect of things itself, right? So why do I talk about UN SDG, although diversity does not fully encompass UN SDG, right? I want to bring this up because this is a UN SDG is a very commonly used area and topic, right, or consideration area, and with reference to UNSDG, these four that I've just shared, right, these four that are standing out currently, they are related to diversity and inclusion, right? So, for instance, right, gender equality and reduction of inequality, right? So this SDG 5 and 10, they aim to promote that social, economic, and political inclusion and ensure equal opportunities for all, right? And that includes gender, age, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, right? And many more, right? For decent work and economic growth, for instance, right, on aid, right, this is where people are calling out for equal pay, right, for the work of equal value, right, and definitely also promoting for safe and inclusive working environments, right? So these four SDGs over here really stand out when we talk about diversity and inclusion, right? And a lot of times, diversity immediately translates into inclusion, right? And that might not necessarily be the case, right? Diversity and inclusions are generally a little bit different. So diversity is not just about differences, it's also about recognizing the values. Whereas inclusion, right, inclusivity, right, is about the intentional effort, right, to ensure that everyone feels welcome and have the sense of belonging, right? So these two words that I've just explained is very theory based, right? So keeping it simple, right? Inclusivity is about having intentions, right? Diversity is the ability to recognize that, the need to have that intentions, right? And these two words usually come together because it's literally one stage after another. Inclusion is the action point itself, right? So it's very important for these two to come together because they are the ones, right, that create, right, impact. And I'll be using this word of impact for some of the slides that I have later on as well, right? Especially for startups, right? Where everyone thinks that, hey, I'm a social enterprise, right? I'm an impact enterprise. But what kind of impact are you really creating there? Is that a measurable impact, right? So we will cover that later as well, right? And looking deep into diversity itself, right? More and more people are actually interested, right? Or as I mentioned earlier, they are more concerned about the issue of diversity, right? These are just some of the statistics that I got, right? 19% with diverse management team actually has higher revenue. And the key here is because of innovation, right? And with that itself, they are more perform the less diverse team when it comes to problem solving, right? So diverse teams are typically more innovative and they are more adaptable, right? And hence, ultimately, more successful. And there are a lot and growing number of companies that are embracing this diversity to try to outperform their competitors, right? You have viewpoints from all the different stakeholders. You have viewpoints from all the different kind of diverse background, and that is the key for a lot of innovation to take place, right? And diversity without inclusion, right? So it basically means that I know that this is a fact, but I'm not including people into this, right? So it does not foster that sense of belonging, right? And without that inclusive culture itself, right, you'll find that more and more companies are getting finding issues with attracting the correct talents and experiences, right? So basically, there is this thing called inclusive hiring. I believe most of us have heard of that, right? So this inclusive culture itself is what is important in encouraging individuals, right, to be able to participate fully, right? They are empowered and they feel more confident when it comes to participating, right? So there is no elimination of ideas, there's no elimination of innovation when it comes to an inclusive culture, right? So diversity, inclusivity, once again, really comes hand in hand for this. And you might be wondering, so I've talked about diversity and inclusion, right? How does this relate to startups, right? What does startup has to do with diversity and inclusion? Right, two ways. Okay, startups are usually the most destructive kind of businesses, right? And they like to challenge assumptions, right? So, with that being said, right, startups are hence the one who usually drive trends. Imagine if there are no startups looking into EVs, who will be the one who will be creating electronic vehicles? Right, so startups are usually the one who identify use case like that, right? Because once again, because of their nature, right? And coming back into diversity and inclusion itself, right? There's really a growing number of trends of startups actually wanting to look into this formal diversity and inclusion initiative, right? And a lot of them are actually having different kind of hiring practices that are more inclusive for different kind of workplaces. And we'll look at that as well later, right? On how this inclusion, right? This activity, right, can actually foster better innovation once again, and also how can tools be used to enable this inclusive hiring. So I do have some examples over there that I can show, right? And that is only on the startup side of things. A lot of startups are not able to fund their own project and their own development. Hence, investors are what is important in the whole startup life cycle as well, right? So these investors, right, are also affecting how startups are looking into their whole plans. And with all the influence on UNSDG diversity and inclusion and all, there are more investors that are actually considering looking into social impact, looking into diversity and inclusion when it comes to evaluating of these startups, right? So this is just the data that I got from PitchBook, right? That there are more investors who are actually looking for startups with a more diverse teams and having more inclusive culture, right? So two examples that I have over here. These two are global brands, right? I'm not sure if Brunei has that, right? Singapore, some very legal to use in Singapore, right? But Airbnb and Uber, right? So they are actually promoting, right, diversity and inclusion. And take note over here, right? They are not shouting about it, right? And that is actually one of the key important area when startups come into this area, right? And I always like to talk about the why. Why do you need to talk about diversity and inclusion, right? Or rather, why do you need to tell people that, hey, use my product, use my brand because I am a diverse brand, I am inclusive, right? Will it really attract more customers? Will it really attract more users, right? I'm not saying that it will 100% not work or 100% not attract potential customers, right? You might attract a small pool of customers to your brand itself to be an ethical brand, right? But ultimately, what you should focus on is on your business model, on how you can expand this, right? So these two examples that I picked up are examples of really not having that focus on telling people that, hey, I'm an inclusive brand. You should be using me, man. Right? So that is what Airbnb and Uber, these two brands, are actually doing. Right? And very importantly, right, I mentioned about startups. I give the example of Uber and Airbnb as startups who are in the social impact part of things, right? But startups are really not just any kind of businesses, right? Startups are actually game changer, right? They are the ones who identify proper use cases, right? They are the ones who are the problem solver. They are the ones who are the innovator, and they are the ones who can champion diversity and inclusion. And this, the way that they champion it, could potentially even reshape how industry and societies look at it. Right? So startups are the ones that are building future cultures. Right? I give another very obvious example over there, right? Co-working space. Right? Why is co-working space gaining more traction besides COVID itself? Because there are a lot of startups who can't afford their own office, right? And they want that communication. And after some time, businesses start to see that, hey, actually, co-working space are also good areas for me to come in, for me to sit down, right? I can meet other people, right? I can potentially work with them, and it creates value, right? So you can see that it has indirectly created a different kind of working culture altogether, right? And that is besides COVID itself, definitely, right? So why, although I mentioned that, hey, this is a very good area for startup, right? Why are startups not doing enough, right? Although a lot of them, right, are at the forefront of using technology for social good itself, right? So with this itself, that is where I want to share a little bit more about understanding the impact that you are creating. I think I mentioned earlier, right? You are not just coming in to, hey, I'm to say that, hey, I'm going to solve this area and I'm going to lead this trend, right? But you need to understand the kind of impact that you are creating, and this impact, you need to know that it's not just for media attention. A lot of times business owners and startups themselves, right, entrepreneurs themselves, do things for the sake of media attention, right? But are you really creating impact there? So I'm showing this slide basically to share a very common understanding of what social enterprises mean, right? And why I'm saying that, because social enterprises are the ones creating impact, right? That is similar to a startup, right? They are startup that looks into impact areas, right? And a lot of times, right, people think that, hey, I am a social enterprise and I need to have financial stability and I need to have impact stability, right? And also, when it comes to this itself, right, this is a theory definition. But if you were to really ask yourself around this area, right, have you actually really seen a social enterprise that's doing well, that is able to scale the impact, right? That since the start they have focused on both the profit side, the financial sustainability side, and also the business model side, right? I have never seen one, right, that is doing well, that is scaling, right? If you are talking about just enough for survival, sure, potentially, right? And social enterprises, a lot of people like to call themselves social enterprises. I have no idea why, right? It doesn't make you any different, right? It just makes things harder for you actually. Okay, but I think when it comes to social enterprises, the ability to scale is also very, very important. And why do I say that? If you are not able to scale, basically you are not able to increase your impact. Right. So with that being said, I want to introduce this concept over here of impact enterprise, right? Not just social enterprises, right? I'll give some example of impact enterprise in just a while. But if you look at this whole flow, basically you have your traditional charity that maximize the impact, right? They don't look at profit, right? Non-profit organization, right? You have your social enterprises, right? They earn just enough to survive, right? And they try to maximize their impact. Okay, that is a standard definition across all, right? And then we talk about impact enterprise later, and we have this traditional business that does not create impact at all, right? I just care about my profit, right? And when you look at impact enterprises itself, this is something that is different because these impact enterprises are key that allows this social impact, right? Can be in terms of diversity and inclusion as well, to maximize that impact that is being created while maximizing their profit. And what I mean by that, right? For instance, Patagonia, right? That shirt brand. For every shirt that they sell, 10% of the fee goes into some cases, right? Some causes. So, which means the more Patagonia sell, the more impact they are creating, right? As compared to social enterprises. Social enterprises are typically very human centered. So, if let's say, right, you open a cafe, right? You open a cafe and you hire PWDs, persons with disability, right? That is a typical social enterprise model, right? So what do they do there, right? They try to earn enough money, right? They feed themselves, they can have that living, right? And they pay these PWDs, and their impact is I provide PWDs with jobs. Great, right? Not saying that it shouldn't be that way, right? It should be that way, but are you able to scale the impact? Are you able to earn enough so that you can multiply your stores out there, right? And with that multiplication of the stores out there, you can hire more people and create bigger impact, right? Hence, technical elements are very important in the scalability of a social enterprise in aim to turn them into an impact enterprise itself, right? And out of all these examples that I gave, right? Uber, Airbnb, Patagonia, right? How many of them are shouting out to tell you that, hey, I'm doing impact. Come and buy from me, so you are creating impact. Their focus is not on that, telling people that, hey, I'm creating impact. It turns it into an ethical business. If you want to find information about it, you can find about it online. But my focus as an impact enterprise is on doing and scaling my business and not to shout about it. Right? So, so basically, I thought I wanted to just introduce this whole concept over here as to understand better about the impact, right? And it goes into the why once again, right? I mentioned about this, and a lot of times people will say that start off with your why, right? Simon Sinek, if you have seen this video of start off with your why, right? Definitely, you need to know the purpose of creating something, how you are going to do that, and what kind of results you want to achieve, right? But I am a fan of turning it the other way around by asking you to try doing something, understand how the process is like, and through that, that is how you discover your why. And now that you have discovered your why, understand how you can apply it into different kind of process and what kind of other results can you achieve. And in my opinion, my personal opinion, right, that is a good way to identify how you can create a more scalable idea, right? So my belief is you coming in, not doing anything, right? It's very hard for you and it's very, very difficult for you to understand what is your why, right? What is your cause? What do you believe it? It might change, right? It might just be because, hey, I'm around this group of friends and hence I'm very excited about it. But after some time, right, you realize that actually it doesn't work out. That is not really my why, right? So the easiest way to go around is what, how, why, and then using your why again, understand how and what, right? So that is my personal belief, right? So really understanding your why over there. And going back into the social impact on diversity and inclusion once again, right? Why are startups the ones, besides them being the drivers, right? Why are startups the one who are the best people to actually promote this diversity and inclusion, right? That sweet spot, right, is something that all startups possess, right? They look into the innovation of things, right? They understand the purpose of running something like that, right? And lastly, right, they have that drive. And this sweet spot itself puts startups at the perfect place to be the one making the change, right? Being the game changer, as I mentioned earlier, being the game changer, being the problem solver, being the innovator itself, and championing this social impact in terms of diversity and inclusion. Right. So once again, with this innovation, right, startups can drive a lot of change to create this diverse and inclusive society. Right. So some of the changes that can potentially apply and work for startups are these 6 areas that I can think of, right? So I'm going to just quickly run through all these areas, and this you will start to realize that this has been some things that has been driven by startups, right? Diversity analytics platform, right? AI in recruitment, helping to identify all the diverse areas and all. VR, right, to help with inclusive training, right? If they don't have access to training itself, right? VR creates a very good opportunity for them. Having inclusive language tools, accessible solutions, or even collaboration platforms. And when I talk about collaboration platform, there are some needs that can't leave their house. So how do you make use of collaborative platforms like that to encourage the discussions? Right. So with these 6 points itself, right, not with these 6 points, but these 6 points itself are areas that people or startups have attempted to solve, and some of them already have solutions out there. So as I mentioned earlier, I will share a few examples, right, around those. Sorry, just bear with me while I go onto my phone for the examples, right? So first example is Textio, Textio. So what does Textio do, right? It's a very good example of a startup that use AI, right, to improve job listings, right? So what this AI do, they analyze the language for inclusivity and allow, with that itself, right, allow a more diverse candidate pool, right? So for hiring, right? So that is Textile, right? Second example, right, relating to VR, right? Mergent, Mursion. This is another startup, right? And what Mergent does, right? They use VR for training, and with VR itself, basically they have the ability to show realistic scenario, right, to enhance empathy and understanding of the market itself, right? And the last example I have, right, essential accessibility, right? So essential accessibility basically focus on creating digital solutions, right, to enhance accessibility for individuals with disabilities, right? So you can see that there are actually these startups out there in this one of these 6 key areas, and these 6 key areas are areas that potentially can help to create a more diverse and inclusive society as well as workplace culture, right? And with that culture being drived, right? That is how the I, right, and social impact in the whole space are being built in, right? So with all those that I've said, right, it's very evident that startups are not just embracing innovation for the sake of their progress, right? There are a lot of opportunities out there for them to identify innovations in different fields, and D&I is one of them, right? So they are leveraging it to break down barriers and make a more inclusion inclusive, right? Age in the digital era, especially. So everything that you have seen here basically are things that are empowered by digital tools, right? And if I were to use the traditional term for startup, right? So now I like to tell people this. Now everywhere you go, people will say that, hey, I'm a startup, right? I 8 years ago, right? 8 to 10 years ago, when Silicon Valley just came out with the term startup, right? It used to be referred to tech-enabled businesses that has innovative element to it, right? So this term itself, this terminology itself has become so great in a way, right? That everyone just likes to call themselves startups. I also don't know why, right? And there are a lot of startups, right, that are starting to look into the whole social impact part of things, right? As I mentioned earlier, with the environmental forces itself, right? With the social pressures coming in, right? With opportunities being identified there, right? And basically saying that, right, I just want to conclude the whole sharing over here, right, by saying that, startups are not just creating business, they are really shaping cultures, right? They are challenging the norms, they are driving diversity and inclusion moving forward, right? And these are just some of the few areas that startups focus on. So with that, thank you for today's discussion, right? I think one very key thing that I want to end off is by saying that remember that the future is very diverse and startups are the forefront of this change. So I hope to see more startups coming into these few areas itself, right? Supporting and driving the change for diversity and inclusion. Right. With that, I think feel free to connect with me on my email or LinkedIn. And yes, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Wei Liang. So, audience, if you have some questions for Wei Liang, you may text up on the chat, and we'll be taking Q&A for 5 minutes, and then we go straight ahead to Kahoot quiz afterwards. We have one audience is still typing her questions. Just wait for a few minutes, yeah. Okay, so we have one question from Malai Didi. Hi, William. One constant question I encounter often is that there is this innate fear to create accessibility in tech, mainly because they aren't sure how to start. What's your advice to everyone on overcoming this fear?
Right. Thanks. I just want to clarify a little bit. You are saying that they are unsure how to start. You mean the startups themselves, or do you mean the users? So I always like to tell people these two things, right? There's a very big difference between customers and users, right? So there's a lot of times we just assume that customers and users are the same. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit. Are you talking about the startups themselves, or are you talking about the users, the startups themselves? Okay, cool. That's actually a very common question, and thank you for that, right? First thing is it comes to the mindset, right? I like to tell everyone that I'm a failed entrepreneur, right? And why do I like to tell people that? Is because I am certain that every single thing that I've done actually creates my life learning kind of opportunity for myself, right? I learn things that people don't learn, right? And that comes to reflection itself. So I think one of the very few quick advice that I can give for this is for these startups, right? To identify and understand that there's nothing wrong with failing. You're actually benefiting yourself before, even when you fail, right? And right, you need to be able to see if you can break things down. Definitely, you are not looking at ability to come in and say that, hey, I'm going to create, right, a tech that or accessibility in tech overnight, right? Are you able to break down the whole process, right? Are you able to validate feature by feature rather than just coming up with a whole application tech tool and so on, right? So I like to use this framework of Lean Six Sigma, right? LEANSIXSIGMA, right? So Lean Six Sigma basically helps and allows you to really break down each individual parts of your business processes itself, identify them and validate them accordingly. And that is actually a skill that needs a bit of practicing, right? Because a lot of times when people have the end goal in mind, they just work towards the end goal without understanding why they are working towards that, right? So breaking down itself can help them see a clearer roadmap, avoiding that fear itself. Second thing is really helping them to understand that there is nothing wrong with failing. There is the fear, right? Is self-induced. It's not market-driven fear, right? So I think those two are the very important areas. If I answer what your question is. Cool, awesome. Yeah, if there are any more questions, happy to discuss them. Oh, keep nodding your agreement. Okay, I'll nod for you so that you can see in the camera.
All right, thank you so much for the question and answer session. So next up, let's go to our Kahoot session. Please get your phones ready. So, for the Kahoot session, it is open to local audiences here, because we just found out that the first winner for the previous session was an overseas attendee. So if the previous attendee got the second place just now, please contact us to claim your prize. Okay, if there's not any more joining for this Kahoot session, I'll just start right away. Yeah, soon. Okay. I'll just wait for a few seconds. Any more joining? No? Yes? No? Okay, I'll just start. Alright. Let's see what's the first question. Question 1. What are the UN SDG relating to D&I? You can answer more than one, yeah? Is it 4, SDG 8, SDG 5, or SDG 10? Wow, you guys are paying attention. Good job. Okay, let's go to the next question and see. Okay, walk. Walk is now on top. So let's go to the next question. True or false? Diversity is similar to inclusion. Yes, it's false. So let's see who is currently at the top. BK is currently at number 1, 2, Dina, and third would be Noor. So let's go to the next question. True or false? Impact startups aims to maximize profits while maximize their product. I mean, their impact. True or false? It's true. The impact startup aims to maximize profits while maximize their impact. So let's see. BK is still on top. Nice. So let's go to the next question. So this is a multi-select answers. The sweet spot to drive D&I startups are: is it drive, innovation, demand, or purpose? Any of it can be the right answers. Choose wisely. So the answers are drive, innovation, and purpose. Roy is currently taking the number 1 spot. The second one would be Noor, and third would be Walk. So let's go to the last question. True or false? Not only startups, investors are also looking at investing into more D&I startups. It's false. Ooh, the plot twist. Okay, let's see. Third place, we got Noor. Second would be Roy. We got the first place. Wow! Congratulations, Walk. Please DM me your details, your full name, your phone number, so that we can contact you to claim your prize during our closing ceremony this Sunday. Alright, so this is last question is a trick question. Yes, that's true, William. The plot twist.
I can just explain a bit. Investors are not looking at investing into more D&I startups. They are considering the D&I factors in startups. It's different.
All right. So, apparently that's our morning agenda. Just like that, we just finished the half day of, our first day for DevFest. Congrats! So, we'll be continuing our session at 2:30 in the afternoon because we'll be having our around 2 hours break for respecting Friday prayers. So, thank you everyone for attending the morning session. Hoping to see you in the afternoon for the next uh, three agendas, which is fascination advantage using AI generated content, elevating captivating messaging for businesses at 2:30, then introducing of Project IDX at 3:30, and at 4 p.m. Tales from a Remote Worker, things to know about working remotely and how to succeed. So, we'll see you guys later. For now, you guys can exit the room and you guys can return back later at 2:15 or 2:30, yeah? All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice break. Have a good lunch. Take a good nap before we start our next journey for the next agenda this afternoon. See you guys later.